Hi, I'm Bob Ellsworth. What have I got in store for you? Oh, all the adventures I've shared, whether they're on islands or offshore or wherever they might be. Had a lot of good times with a lot of wonderful people. Met some very notable people and very, very capable people. And that's what I want to tell you about, because there's stories that go with everybody in this world. And that was part of our adventure. And we enjoyed it whenever we went on these adventures. And they were on islands. Sable Island was one of them off the coast of Canada. Down in Florida for another adventure. And then with Maureen O'Hara, one of my favorite Hollywood actresses, in the adventures of putting together the documentary of the big plane, which can be seen up at the New England Air Museum. So at 7:30, I'll tell you a little bit about that on a Wednesday evening. Join us, won't you? Thank you.
44 degrees latitude, 60 degrees longitude. Sable Island lies almost 200 miles southeast into the Atlantic from Halifax, Nova Scotia, and about 150 miles from Sydney to the north. Braving mountainous seas, government boats bring supplies to Sable 4 times each year. Air Atlantic charter service can fly to the island when weather conditions permit. The island is moving at the rate of 2 feet per day, or 1/8 of a mile a year. 10 long months of careful planning and research had gone into our 12-man expedition to Sable. Amateur archaeologists and adventurers, we were fascinated with her history. We planned to live on the island, to probe her turbulent past, and to study her wildlife. Fairly stable weather prevails on Sable during mid-July and early August. It would give us just 3 short weeks to work and film our adventures. Ile de Sablon, as the French and Portuguese sailors called it 300 years ago, Sand Island has no love, only fatal fascination for humans. The nations of the world have a common rule about navigation in the vicinity of Sable. They all give the island a 35-mile wide berth. The east and west lights on the island are now automatic. Their main function, to provide a meteorological station for Canada. Dead ships that protrude from the treacherous shallows around the island are the watery tombstones of maritime disasters that have marked Sable as the graveyard of the Atlantic. The lost lives that are recorded in shipping company registries are mute evidence of the navigational treachery of this area of the North Atlantic. All the human life on Sable is concentrated on the west, while the east is completely hostile to man. Fresh water is quick to rise from beneath the sand, where it lies only 18 inches from the surface. Most inland water is contaminated by the salt spray from the ocean, carried inward by the constant winds. The stout timbers of the buildings that were once used to house the island's garrison and give shelter to the shipwrecked are now being enveloped in Sable's undulating sand. Wild horses, their manes flowing in the wind, charge across the vast expanse of sand, as they have for more than 2 centuries. Terns now occupy and breed new generations within the ruins of the blacksmith shop. The advance party was already waiting for the main body of our team to land through the treacherous fog. We had been held back from landing on the island for 2 days because of rain and poor visibility. No planes could leave Halifax for the long trip over the ocean until the weather broke slightly. One plane load had already been forced to turn back when they were actually over Sable. Landing was impossible at that point because the pilot was unable to see the beach area. This landing area was only a few thousand yards long and about the same distance wide, between the ocean and inland Wallace Lake, an adventure in itself. By 10 minutes of 4 on the 18th of July, the final group landed on Sable Island, bringing the total expedition strength to 12. Our all-Connecticut team thus became the largest expedition ever granted permission by the Canadian government to land and explore Sable. Lee Prettyman signed on as master diver to lead a 4-man team. A veteran salvage diver, he had descended into the North Atlantic many times. Joe Plakunas, already a seasoned diver for his young years, left his underwater construction job to join the expedition. He craved the challenge of unknown waters and a chance to photograph below the surface. A.J. Sullivan, an articulate spokesman for his generation and a Boston native, he lived and worked in Connecticut. He wanted to photograph the members of the expedition each day and in every attitude to capture their character studies on film. Tom Stockton came to Sable as our sound man. An ex-Navy man with service in Vietnam, he was pursuing a career in broadcasting. Like most of us, he sought clues to the past and perhaps the discovery of a long-buried ancient ship. As expedition director, Bob Ellsworth's desire to explore and film this remote Atlantic outpost had been stimulated by an earlier trip to Sable. As he had on previous expeditions, he wore his Army fatigue hat for luck. William Chip Cooper is an avid diver. He had worked with Lee Prettyman on other occasions. As a part-time diver, he had studied ocean life. He would shoot his first underwater motion picture footage. An intense interest in oceanography and underwater science made 16-year-old Roman Zajac want to come to Sable with his friend Paul. They attend the same high school, and this would be their first major adventure. A star football player, he was our #1 cook. A junior at Yale University, Larry Engel was one of the earliest volunteers for our project. His still photography would capture every phase of our efforts, as well as the somber beauty of the island. Like his friend Roman, the zest for adventure and learning made Paul Catalana want to come to Sable. Our #2 cook, this would be his first encounter with adventure in a strange land. With roots in Canada, Ron Myers had come to Connecticut to live and work. As auxiliary diver, he rounded out the team. He felt very much at home on Sable Island, close to his Canadian heritage. Sable Island would be our home for almost a month, and we wanted to get acquainted as soon as possible. For the moment, the weather was good, with very little haze, ideal for photography. Our base camp was located next to the West Light. From here, most of the team, including the divers, set forth on July 19th for the East Spit. Conferring with master diver Lee Prettyman, we were convinced that as long as the weather held, we would have a good opportunity to get the divers into the surf. They would first try to board the Greek freighter Alpheus. Their next effort would be to locate, if possible, the exact position of the last ship to founder on the island, the SS Manhasset. The day was clear and not too cool, but more and more we began to learn what is meant by the constant winds of Sable. The current proved exhausting and overwhelming. The divers soon discovered that the South Beach surf was uncompromising even on a good day. Plakunas first, then Prettyman, tried to get a line aboard the Alpheus. They were defeated, and at one point, Prettyman almost drowned from sheer exhaustion. Director Jack Gookin joined the rescuers as they dragged Lee from the treacherous tide and sand shoal. It had been too much. At day's end, the wind gradually turned much cooler. The darkness began to envelop the tired band. They withdrew for the night to Old Station Number 4, a part of Sable's past, when stranded ships and distressed humanity were the mariner's plight. The next day, the group started back to the east, searching for signs of the freighter Manhasset and other wreckage. The drive across the 15 miles of blowing sand was a long one. En route, the men uncovered the hull of an old wooden wreck that would prove an important find to our expedition. They propped her against the wind and blowing sand. We would have to return before long to the scene, or she would be lost again. The crew probed the ribs for some sign of identification. She was thought to be of Spanish registry. This was a valuable discovery. When we returned to the site, we would use explosives to search beneath her once graceful bow. This was all that was left of the SS Manhasset, the last ship claimed by Sable. She was an American freighter under Panamanian registry. On July 4th, 1947, she ran aground on the South Shore. Somewhere offshore about 500 yards, the rest of her was obscured by sand and sea. This is the only road through the dunes. It crosses the island at several strategic points on the western tip. This portion leads from the South Beach and Wallace Lake directly past the weather station and on up to our base camp, next to the house occupied by Norman and Crystal Bell at Number 1 Blowout Drive. Mr. Bell is the diesel electric station attendant and maintains 5 power plants on the island. He also looks after the West Light. This is the residence of truly singular people who have found peace in the world and compatibility with humanity. Norman Bell discusses Sable Island with Tom Stockton.
How long have you and your wife lived on the island?
We're into our 7th year now. Sable Island is home to us now. As you can well imagine, it would be. When we came to the island, we came with the understanding that we would be staying 2 years. We promised we would stay for 2 years. But we established well. It suits us to stay here, so now it is home. And we're very likely to stay for a few more years yet.
Do you have a favorite story about the island, Mr. Bell?
Not really, nothing that you could separate from the others. To me, the island is integral. When I was at sea, we heard many stories about the island. Ghost stories, stories of wrecks, and the horses. The horses are here, but the stories about them don't match the fact. In our search, in such records are available, we find that they could have been brought on purpose, but more likely that they started by a few swimming ashore from some wreck. And in the early days, of course, in such a time, there was nobody on the island to prevent them from multiplying. You see, the island was a little bit bigger in them days. I doubt it. But in any case, it was big enough to support them. They're strange little horses. There is some belief that they are regressing, that they were bigger. I believe this is so, that they're going back to nature. We don't notice it anymore, but other people coming on the island, they're struck by the strange size and form of them. They're not ponies, they are little horses. In fact, some of them are not so little. A bill was put through Parliament stating that the horses were to be left alone. They weren't to be fed, they weren't to be molested in any way. Now we can bypass this a little bit. There are supposed to be 2 riding horses on the island, and the department sends out food for these 2 riding horses. In effect, they send much greater quantity of food, and we try to feed such horses as will eat it. We have been asked, why don't you feed more of them? There's a good reason. It's not because we don't want to, but the wilder ones, the horses farther down towards the east, have never been fed. They don't know what hay is. So when in the winter, and the winter can be very bad, if the food supply gets very poor, then they're forced to come to the station. And they come to the station usually too late. We can't do anything for them. They're on their last legs. The few that do get here and try to shelter, we try to feed them. Now, all their lives they've been used, especially in the winter, to paw. You do even in the deep grass in the summer. You see them, they paw. It's kind of built in.
Mrs. Bell, I've noticed, looking around the island, that the conditions here are kind of harsh, even for a man to endure. How do you find living here as a woman without shopping centers and all the modern conveniences?
Matter of fact, I don't miss shopping centers, and we have all the conveniences that we have on the outside. We have.
Crystal Bell is of German origin and stands as a classic contrast to her husband, Norman, who hails from Scotland. Her accomplishments are many. She writes poetry, sings, and is proficient in handiwork with shells and driftwood. An excellent cook, she generously provided many delicious treats for our grateful crew while on the island. She also grows the only full-fledged garden on the island.
I noticed the flowers are very beautiful. How did you manage to grow them in this sand?
Now, in the sand they wouldn't grow. We have to make a mixture, and there's manure and peat moss and sand and lots of water and love, and they grow. Anything will grow in the greenhouse, but nothing outside. So.
What about the island interests you the most?
That's really hard to pin down, but there are so many things what you could do. You can go beachcombing there. Maybe you are interested to know the Atlantic base scallop, what is found here, is a fossil. It's about 8,000 years old, and it comes from the time when Sable Island was semi-tropical. And then you do bird watching, and you do a lot of things. You really can do what you want to do. If you want to do something in the house, do some painting, do some knitting, do anything. Just what comes in your mind, you do, and go and do it.
So you actually enjoy living on Sable?
Oh yes, we enjoy it very much.
The difference between the gulls nesting on the mainland and those found here is the fact that those nesting here and raising their young here have to do so with no garbage or men's rubbish to aid them. Now, the gulls on the mainland seem to subsist to a large extent on what man throws away. They hang around city dumps and sewer outlets. Here, there are no dumps, there are no outlets. They live on what washes up on the beach from the sea, on what they can catch from the sea, and on what they can catch on land, namely other birds' eggs and other birds. So I'm interested in seeing if the general increase in numbers of gulls all around the North Atlantic over the past 30 or 40 years is perhaps related in some way to the presence of man's garbage all around the North Atlantic. And if the birds here on Sable are notably less successful...
Tony Locke lived in Cardiff, Wales before coming to Canada and eventually at Dalhousie University in Halifax.
Of the two types of gulls, the blackbacks and the herring, which is more prevalent on Sable?
Oh, the herring gulls everywhere seem to be the rather more prevalent. The blackbacks live in among the herring gulls, and they're rather more predatory in their habits than the herring gulls. But always the herring gulls are the more common.
What are your techniques for studying the gulls?
Oh, well, I come here early in May, just as they're beginning to nest. And I find the nest of these birds, and I mark them, and I mark the eggs. And then I visit them every 2 or 3 days and find out how many eggs that are initially laid actually get through to hatch into chicks. And it's pitifully few, in fact. Most of them get knocked off within the first few weeks. And of those then that do hatch, many of the chicks perish in the first 10 days of their life. But I follow them through. When they're about 4 or 5 days old, I put a band on them. And I follow them through then, visiting them every 2 or 3 days and weighing them. Now I weigh them because I'd like to see how fast they can grow on their natural diet out here and how many chicks the mothers can raise. So sometimes I'll take chicks from one nest and put them in another nest, so some poor mother has to raise, instead of her usual 2 or 3, perhaps 4 or 5 birds. I want to see how far you can push the birds, how much work you can make them do, and how many young they can raise under these conditions.
Tony Locke has a mission on Sable Island, to collect all the information he can on the gulls. His wife, Carol, joins Tony when she can, so that she can be part of the action too. While they browsed, they accidentally discovered the ancient deck of a 19th century sailing ship. Buried in the churning sands, our people marked it for a later inspection. That night, we checked our charts to determine what ship she might have been. Our entire team organized into a work party and headed east to probe the timbers of the wooden ships that had previously been marked for this purpose. On the 26th of July, 5 members of the group elected to plant explosives on the long wooden deck of the 19th century sailing ship to see what lay below. Lee Prettyman is an experienced demolitions man, and he told us of his plan to blow the deck of the unidentified derelict so as not to destroy any evidence or marking. There was the necessity to make every minute count as the weather had begun to turn sullen. Even the gulls and other birds were beginning their vigil in the cover of the dunes. All life on the island, in fact, seemed to anticipate the coming storm. The terns used this old deck as a depository for their eggs. Although it was unnecessary because they are plentiful, the operation was held up long enough to remove and save at least some of the eggs. Judging from the more than usual harsh sounds of the grumpy parents hovering overhead, they knew what we were up to. Each bundle of dynamite was carefully planted for the maximum effect. In our haste, we almost forgot the static electricity from the sand, which could easily set off the sensitive detonator caps now attached to the lead wires. We gently pushed more sand over the holes. Now, Lee said that all was in readiness and cautioned us to move back to safety. In preparation to detonate, he gave the safety countdown.
Ready to blast? Stay clear! Blasting!
The first explosion had lifted the aft portion of the deck to give us a better look. Lee was convinced that another blow would do the trick, so the explosives were made ready. We all hoped the water which lies just below the surface of the sand wouldn't flood out the lower deck.
Okay, Lee. All right, stand by. Ready to blast? Stay clear. Blasting!
There it was, the perfect revelation of what was once the whole vessel. What she contained would always remain her secret. The island prevented any further search. From the evidence and location, we believed her to have been the bark Isabella, victim of a storm about the year 1845. Now came the moment we had all awaited, the discovery of something momentous. Something from history's past that had been long forgotten, but like truth, never finally crushed to earth. This was the hull that had been marked the previous week with the hope the wind would not obscure it with sand before our return.
Hey, it looks like it's buried pretty deep in here. Yeah, it certainly does. Doesn't look like it did the other day. The sand really piled up here. What do you think, Lee? I think we should dig under here. You know where we were here the other day? Yeah. Hey, look what the sand has done since the other day. You know what amazes me is that you just give this wind a few minutes and you got troubles. You may never find anything better to dig in here. Right in here? Yeah, it's a plank right here. Right here? Yeah. Okay. Let's bear a hand and let's get under. We get a charge in here. A charge over this side here. Okay. So we can string it across. That'll flip it right over this way. String it right across. String it here. String it from back here. String it from that side over there, Ron. We can start digging right in there, Ron. You got a shovel? No, it's only one of them. Here, I think I'll clear a shovel in here. See if you get a hole under there. You gonna put another one over there? Where do you want it? Right about here? Yeah. Get it down an angle. Get it down an angle. You just want the same slope, don't you? Yeah, same slope, and we possibly can get it. Okay. Oops, there goes. That's all right. I'll get this. Okay. What do you want? About a foot and a half in, Lee? No, hey, look. I'd like to get it back down this way. You want the angle to the right? Yeah, because it's a plank right in here. Feel it? We can get up under this plank. See? Wait a second. That's what I was going at an angle like this. See, Bob? Okay. We get out in through there. Then we get up under that plank. Look, here, I've hit it right now. See if we got another deck under there. Hey, I got it right here. Okay. Another deck? Yeah, it's another deck underneath like a whole ship. I know. Yeah, I just hit part of it myself here. Yeah, but you see, there was much more of it showing the other day.
We prepared the charges carefully to blow the wood and brass so that we might somehow identify the remains.
Hey, you think this hole here would be good enough for this one? Yeah, that's good. That should really... Another one right about here, eh? Yeah, look, Chips.
How many are you going to plant, Lee?
For a minute.
Lee?
Yeah.
How many of these are you going to plant?
24. Okay. 24 sticks.
Hey, Lee?
Yeah.
So you got a beam right here.
Good. Then that's beautiful. We'll put that one right there. That's the end of it right there?
Well, no. This is just the spot where a spike was sticking out.
Right.
But it's running like this.
We'll take that section too. Oh.
Yeah. Let the detector show that.
That's got a good reading in there.
That's it? Oh, all right, I got you. Right.
Hey, Lee?
The outfield.
You got some over here, too.
Good. Okay, we'll clear this all out.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Lee. This looks old.
Yeah, it's old.
I mean old.
These bronze spikes indicate that they're old.
Yeah, antique collector's going to tell us about that.
I hope so.
No, I mean...
Here's the base of it, Bob.
That's it? Oh, all right, I got you. Right.
If we get up under there, it's sand.
I'm right under this one here, Lee.
I got a real strong breeze.
Beautiful.
Watch, no, watch.
The only reason I recommend that we hurry with this is because of the weather.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to change.
Okay, look, it took about 24 sticks on this, at least.
All right, I'll start stringing them up now. Okay, Lee. All right, stand by. Ready to blast? Stay clear. Blasting!
Norman Bell would tell us that night that we had probably uncovered a British ship of the line. A man of war, indicated by the broad arrow mark on the head of the brass spikes and bungs found in the wreckage. We then double-checked the chart and found that only one man of war had ever founded on Sable Island. She was the HMS Barbados in the year 1812. It was confirmed that she was on picket duty during the last war with England. After capturing the American vessel James Madison, she ran aground on the north shore of Sable. We discovered her on the south shore. Sand and wind, nature and time had actually dragged her across the island to where she now rested. The 27th of July was born in a savage downpour that had started almost at the same time we returned to base camp on the previous night. To date, we had found 2 wooden ships and could add new information to our log. The SS Manhasset remained inaccessible beyond the reach of our team. With the elements raging outside, we rested and listened for weather reports from Halifax. Sable's horses, long experienced in the variables of the island's weather, first huddled together against the storm. As it grew in intensity, they reflected the turbulence in a brief conflict of flying hoops. These are the first motion pictures ever taken of the Ipswich Sparrow.
The Ipswich looks very much like the Savannah. However, it will breed only on Sable. And this is, of course, the interesting fact. It was unknown for some time where the Ipswich Sparrow really bred, but finally they discovered that it was here on Sable. They haven't found any other locations where it will breed. And
Wayne Stobo, Ipswich Sparrow expert and ornithologist, also from Dalhousie University, Halifax, a Canadian and a strong conservationist.
Well, because it breeds on Sable, it seems to me they would call it the Sable Sparrow. Why do they call it an Ipswich?
Well, it was first seen at Ipswich, Massachusetts, I believe. And this is the name. Of course, at this time, they did not even know where this particular sparrow was breeding. They had no conception of the idea that it would breed only on a small island, 21 square miles in size. And as such, it ended up as the Ipswich Sparrow. A misfortune, but nevertheless.
Well, exactly what are you doing with the sparrow? How are you studying them?
Well, most of the work I'm doing, at least this summer, this project should cover 3 years, I expect. And this summer, I'm primarily observing it, trying to determine the territorial nature of the males, the number of females it will have, whether it's monogamous or polygamous, how many clutches it will have. So far, it looks like most females have 2 or 3 clutches in a summer. Nesting stage is about 10 days from laying of eggs to hatching, and then another 10 days to fledging. And I would say the female feeds almost solely until about the 7th day, and then the male increases his tempo of feeding until they fledge.
What is the average age of a sparrow? How long do they live, their lifespan?
That is what we're trying to find out right now. However, I would expect it'll be about 3 or 4 years. This would be good for a sparrow, I think, because it has to migrate over about 150 miles of ocean to a rather small point of land here on Sable. And as such, there should be a very high mortality. But we are concerned with the laying of the eggs, the mortality involved in number of eggs that will hatch. Also the mortality involved in the fledglings. How many of those are going to leave the nest? We don't have any idea as yet. I don't know whether we will be able to find out what the mortality is after they leave the nest, because it's very hard to keep track of them. We can't disturb the birds when they're still in the nest.
For ornithologist Wayne Stobo, the life and habitat of the Ipswich sparrow held great fascination. On July 29th, our explorations took us to the island's west spit. Diver Joe Plakunas found beauty on the surface of the ocean as he waded into the white-capped waters on the west spit. This is the unique spot where the ocean washes from the north, south, and east to converge over the west spit in a thunderous tumult of spray. Our final field trip took us to the site of the British freighter Skidby. En route, we took time out to watch the antics of harbor seals, basking in the sun and playing in the waves. The bulls often reach 800 pounds to match their 6-foot length. They were an interesting study, as the seals seemed to savor the very elements of sable that had brought disaster to man. Gray seals, the other species indigenous to the island, would not return from their summer sojourn until late fall. On the North Beach, about 7 miles from Base Camp 1, the Skidby's boilers protrude the calm surf as a stark reminder of that long ago January 31st, 1905, when she stranded just offshore and settled in her shallow grave. All hands were alerted for the campsite opposite the Skidby. We set up the area for exploration and filming around the hull. We also knew that many seals swam and frolicked here. In all probability, we could get some underwater footage if the conditions were right. It was calm and shallow. The divers agreed that the weather was ideal. We spent the day rigging the camera line from the shore to one of the ship's boilers. The setting sun wrote the finale to our busy day. After a restful night, the men emerged from their tents to eat a hearty breakfast before beginning the day's activities. The contrast in weather on Sable's north beach as opposed to the south is almost the difference between summer and winter. The underwater camera was ready for action. Cameraman Bob Ellsworth and divers Plakunas and Koopa prepared to film the great harbor seals at play beneath the waves. The seal pups were the only members of the community interested in our camera. The adults were distant and suspicious. Darkness and fog enveloped the Skidby, and the tired band retreated to Base Camp 1. With morning, Sable's ever-changing weather improved as the fog lifted.
Mr. Bell, it's such a beautiful day out today. It's hard to believe that the winters are so fierce.
Yes, and it'll be very difficult to convince you just how fierce they are. Truly, you look around you today and you see Sable Island with her best foot forward, a smiling face. But you see, if you look down there now, towards the gap, you see the South Beach, and little rollers going by. Now, I'm calling them little, whether you'll agree with me or not, they are little, because in the winter time, they'll be at least 5 times that high. We don't even have to look through the gap. In the winter, we can, usually, we don't look here, from here, incidentally. This wouldn't be a very good place to stand. We would be looking through our windows up here, and we'd see the waves start over here, and they'll go by, and they look for all the world like a row of sails, you know, like schooner sails. And they'll just follow one after the other, just steady, steady, steady. And the roar, well, it's out of this world. It sounds like a great army going by.
On July 31st, we helped unload the last summer boat to the island. The Department of Marine had sent supplies and equipment to the officer in charge, Fred Andruschuk, and his staff from the mainland. A landing craft was dispatched from the larger parent boat, which could not possibly come in close to the island. Trip by trip, hour after hour, the boat was unloaded as the fog hovered ever closer. Working as a team, the government staff and our crew completed the job. Before darkness set in, the boat was able to leave the island's treacherous shoals and surf for the comparative safety of open water and the parent ship. New heavy-duty equipment is tested on Sable's deep sand. Our expedition was complete. We had found history, adventure, and peace etched in the island's moving sands. We prepared for Air Atlantic's planes to pick us up for our return to Halifax and home. Fog, rain, and haze added a postscript to our story. Sable underlined her mastery of humanity as we waited 5 additional days for her weather to clear. Finally, with mixed emotions, we bade her goodbye to her loyal citizens, Norman and Crystal Bell, and our good friends of the staff. We said our heartfelt thanks and farewell. Flying homeward, we reflected on our month-long adventure on the island. She had left her mark on all our lives, this boomerang of ever-shifting sand. Pondering what the future might hold for Sable, we recalled the words of our island friends.
Man always interferes wherever he goes because he goes equipped with such powerful machines. And wherever man steps or takes his machines, he does a little bit of damage. And it's just a limit to how much damage a rather unstable island like Sable can take. He's introduced animals, horses. There have been successive plagues of everything from pigs to cats. But now, man not only is introducing machines to the island, but I am told that he wants to mine the island. And this brings, well, all sorts of people in with machines to strip the place bare.
I think the main important thing about Sable in its future is some form of conservation. I personally hope and think it is in all probability that eventually the Canadian government will make Sable some type of national preserve of this nature.
I think it won't change in the way of the island itself. The only thing, the wind and the sand will move from the west and will build on at the east. But the horses won't destroy the island or anything like that. But the vehicles, man might, but not the animals, not nature.
It can be altered. But if we prevent, as we said a little while ago, if we prevent any commercial expeditions against the island, then the island will stand. The wind will change it. The dunes will shift. You'll see that the north dunes will fall, but as rapidly as they fall, the sand will blow over and they'll build on the other side.
I wanted to make a documentary because there was a great market for the documentary. And I thought something unusual. And I had heard about Sable Island through a friend. That's how you get into trouble, when you hear about things through a friend in this world. But it sounded fascinating because of the tremendous number of wrecks. And the irony of it is there was a ship that was wrecked off Sable Island, a merchant ship called the SS Manhasset. And that's kind of the area I come from on Long Island, Manhasset. We lived in Plandome adjacent to Manhasset. So a lot of things fascinated me about the island. And I'll tell you, there was a wonderful story with great text and pictures in National Geographic magazine at the time. And that fascinated me. The stories of how the certain type of bird out of Massachusetts, a sparrow, migrated to Sable Island every winter. and the seals and just everything generally. And the little flowers that grow on Sable Island, tiny roses. And then there was the beautiful cake that was made by the skipper of the island, Mr. Bell, and his wife. And she made a cake and invited me over one night for dinner from these little berries that grew around this lake, inland lake. In the middle of this little island is an inland lake. And guess what? Not salt water, but fresh water. And I saw a baby seal with the most beautiful eyes take one look at me, and it ran, I don't blame it, and it ducked into the fresh water, and I can't tell you how deep. But that water was the source of refreshment for the horses that lived on the island. They knew where the fresh water was. But it was surrounded in the most beautiful way on the tips. You could see the ocean coming in from 3 different directions. So there was nothing but photography on that island, as you can well imagine.